Let's take a look at Project 5 for Algebra 2B. This is the last part. It corresponds to Lesson 25. So we're still working on this survey stuff. Cal has decided to survey 880 inhabitants of the kingdom so that he could have a confidence level of 95% and a margin of error of 3%. He found that 72% of his sample answered yes, and that's important. So 72% answered yes to the question. So Mr. Amity can infer that most likely between blank and blank inhabitants of the kingdom have done or will do something to prepare their kitchen before Gormando's visit. So this survey is talking about 880 inhabitants. The question, though, is about inhabitants of the kingdom. Okay, so a couple things to consider. So first, this margin of error is important. So the reason that we're saying between this number and that number is due to that margin of error. So let's kind of zoom out and take a look at this. So what we're saying is that Cal surveyed this part of the population. He surveyed 880 out of the total 5,000, and 72% of them responded yes to a particular question. So we're saying, okay, well then if 72% of that sample said yes, how many of the population would have said yes? Okay? Now, the reason again, and so the reason why we're not just saying what's 72% of the total population of 5,000, the reason we're not doing that is because of margin of error. So we're accounting for our margin of error, which is 3%. So that would be 72% plus or minus 3%, okay? So what we're saying is that his finding was 72%, the margin of error of 3%. So we're establishing kind of a range, okay? And we're saying, all right, well, if the margin of error is 3%, 72 minus 3 is 69%. 72 plus 3 is 75%. So here's what we're saying. We're saying, all right, if we look at the total population, then between 69 and 75% of them will say yes. So your job is to say what is 69% of the population, and that's going to go in blank A. And then you're going to figure out what's 75% of the population, and that's going to go in blank B. Okay? So again, we have a 3% margin of error, so we're kind of making like an under. That means we could be off by 3% under or 3% over 72%, which is why we're establishing that range of 69 to 75%. However, we're not just talking about the survey now, we're talking about the whole population. So this question is really asking you, what is 69% of a population of 5,000? And what's 75% of a population of 5,000? So once again, consider the sample size, confidence level, and margin of error given in question 1. Cal found that 24% said yes to his third survey question. So he can infer that between blank and blank inhabitants will answer the same. So it's just like in question 1. We have this ideal number of 24%, but we're saying that there's a margin of error of 3%. So really we're talking about 24% plus or minus 3%. So you're going to figure out what's 24 minus 3%, what's 24 plus 3%. And then you're going to say, you're going to find that percentage of 5,000 because that's the total population. And with the next one, you're going to figure out what's 24% plus 3%, and you're going to find that percentage of 5,000, the total population. Mr. Amity can infer that most likely between this number and this number. Inhabitants of the kingdom have done or will do something to prepare another part of their home before Gormando's visit. Next, in an upcoming lesson, you'll learn about standard deviation and z-scores. So since that's in an upcoming lesson, we're not going to worry about it right now. But we are going to infer something from them. So recall the first question, which was that scale of 1 to 5 question. So suppose that when he asked this question, the average rating on that scale of 1 to 5 was 1 or 4.1 with a standard deviation of 0.2. The z-score, and don't worry about this too much, the z-score that corresponds to a 95% confidence level is 1.96. So by multiplying the z-score, this z-score, by standard deviation, which was 0.2, you can get the margin of error that corresponds to a 95% confidence level. So all of that information was just to say that for this 4.1 answer, this 4.1 scale answer, we're saying that the margin of error equals 0.392. All right, all this information in here is just saying that the average score, the average scale score was a 4.1, and the margin of error is plus or minus 0.392. Okay. So what you have to do is figure out. It says if Cal applies this statistic to the entire population to estimate the parameter, then what? So this is just like the last two questions. Okay, it says he's going to apply the statistic to the parameter, meaning instead of just talking about those 880 surveyed things, people or creatures, we're talking about the whole population. Okay, so set this up exactly like you did with the last two. You have this 4.1 number plus or minus 0.392. That's going to give you two numbers. It's going to give you 4.1 plus 0.392, and it's going to give you 4.1 minus 0.392. And that's going to establish your range. Okay? So once you figure out that number, that's really all you have to do, because this was not a how many people answered that way. It was this is the average rating of the score. So you don't need to do any further multiplication after that. Okay? It's just what will the average rating be when we look at the total population. Okay, so that average rating will be something based around this number, this 4.1 number. It'll be between 0.0392 below it and 0.0392 above it. And finally, write a paragraph that summarizes the results of Mr. Amity's 3-part survey so that he can submit the paragraph to his editor for tomorrow's newspaper. Be sure to include a discussion of margins of error in your summary. Refer to the survey results given above in question 1, 2, and 3. So when we say summarize the results, again, really focus on margin of error here. It says be sure to include a discussion of margins of error in your summary. Refer to the survey results given above in question 1, 2, and 3. So imagine you're this reporter and you're summarizing your results, and for the most part, I think you'll just want to rely on this section of the project. That you can use any information you want from the other sections, but most of those were like, if Cal did this, what would happen? If Cal did that, what would happen? It was this part of the project that really gave you the survey results, so I would stick to this one. But again, do whatever you need to do, and just discuss the results. So present it to me as a report. When I read this, I should understand the way the survey participants answered for question 1, 2, and 3, and I should also understand the margins of error, and I should understand the answers you chose to each question for 1, 2, and 3, and why you chose them.